Hello, my name is Thomas. Welcome to British Culture. Albion Never Dies. This week, I'm joined by returning guest Roland Hulme, a very successful self-published British author living in the United States. I ask him about his top 3 British comedies of all time. Okay, Roland, thank you very, very much for joining me. Once again, I have returned to the well of Roland.
The Well of Roland. That sounds like an Indiana Jones movie. Or Harry Potter.
Can I ask, for anyone who doesn't know you, they clearly should know you, but would you like to introduce yourself, give a quick thumbnail sketch of who you are?
Well, I write novels. I'm a novelist. I write romance novels actually about a motorcycle gang, and sometimes I write novels under my own name, and I love making videos about James Bond and history and other stuff. I don't know. I'm just around.
You're just around, and mainly these days around in the USA.
That's right. Yes, don't let the accent fool you. I live in New Jersey, actually. So I say New York because I'm like 40 minutes away from New York, and I worked in Manhattan for years. But yeah, I live in America, and I love it.
Yes, and so we're going to talk about comedies, of course, British comedies. But you've been in America a long time. America has some great comedies, but you still have your top 3 favorite British comedies.
Oh, I do. Sitcoms are just one of the things where you really see the difference between the American and the British mentality. Even more so when you see some of the British shows that got transplanted to America. And like one of the things is in British shows, normally your lead character is completely insufferable.
Oh yeah.
Whereas in America, they always try to make them likable.
Yeah. So if I said, "Oh, you're just like the main character from any American sitcom," it'd probably be a compliment.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, certainly like Frasier or something, they have their idiosyncrasies, and like Frasier is pretentious, but he's got a good heart.
Yeah.
And The Office, the first 2 seasons of the American Office, I think they went straight off the British scripts, but then they made Michael Scott kind of like an insufferable jerk who's actually a nice guy with a heart of gold. Whereas they don't have that compunction.
No. So the original British version, you wouldn't say David Brent has a heart of gold, would you?
No,
Definitely
definitely
and equally,
not.
if I said, I mean, for example, I've told a few people I never found Alan Partridge funny ever until I met somebody who was Alan Partridge.
Yes.
And then when I watched it, it's changed completely. Now, when I say this man, I haven't named him because it's not a compliment to say that he is Alan Partridge.
I think that's, I mean, one of my favorite shows is Fawlty Towers. And I think that is, I get it. I mean, my dad's been Basil Fawlty. I've found myself being Basil Fawlty on more than one occasion. Even my wife has said, like, just like Basil Fawlty. You can kind of relate to it.
I say, yeah, because the lady who played, in Keeping Up Appearances, Hyacinth Bouquet.
Yes.
Great dramatic, I think Shakespearean actress, and was asked about, but you're playing this ridiculous character. And she said, no. People have their moments like this. We're just stringing along her moments over the week. Maybe in the whole week, she is just a normal person, but we are highlighting the most ridiculous points in her week.
Absolutely. That's Victor Meldrew. He was another one. My mother was always calling my dad Victor Meldrew.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. But again, if I described him as, again, America's the easy reach, right? Because we do see American sitcoms here in the UK. So, but if I were to say, oh, he's just like, there was an American version of One Foot in the Grave. So if I say he's just like that character, again, it's kind of a compliment.
Yeah, like if someone said, "Oh, you're Chandler," then normally that's. In fact, people have discussions, don't they? Which one of the friends are they?
Yeah, and again, it's not an insult to say that you're any of them, really. I mean, even Phoebe.
Yeah. Oh, I was going to say Ross is probably the trickiest one, but I've got quite a few friends who admit that they're Ross.
So let's get straight to it. You have a top 3. I messaged you and asked, do you have a top 3? And you seem to spend a little time thinking you knew which ones were
Absolutely,
your top 3
I knew.
Sitcoms.
So my top 3 British sitcoms are Fawlty Towers, Blackadder, and Red Dwarf.
Okay, let's start with Fawlty Towers. You mentioned it before. First of all, for those who are not familiar with it, what's the setup?
So Fawlty Towers is a sitcom that takes place in Torquay. I used to live in Devon, so it's a seaside town. It's kind of like a rundown seaside town that's kind of like a tourist destination that's lost its sheen. And
Fawlty Towers, nice.
Yes, and Fawlty Towers is this little independent hotel run by this chap called Basil Fawlty, and he's an insufferable man. He's he's terse, he's rude, he's arrogant, he's insufferable. He's also quite hilarious. And the whole premise of the show is he does something to upset someone or make a bad situation happen, and then in his weaselly ways to try and get out of it, he makes it worse and worse and worse. And I think, to me, Fawlty Towers is like the peak of comedy, because it escalates and escalates and escalates, and sometimes it's so excruciating you want to leave the room. And that's just what makes it so brilliant. And also, he is a very relatable character. I mean, the way he tries to be polite through clenched teeth, and he'll go up to his wife and say, "How are you, my little nest of vipers?" And I find myself quite like that, because I always try to be civil, but sometimes I clench my teeth and I'll say quite passive, and I get quite irritated by things. But you have this veneer of like civility that you put on, whereas you're like bubbling with rage underneath.
I've noticed that British comedy does lean into awkwardness quite a bit. Like,
yes,
ooh, uncomfortable as I watch this.
Yeah, and I think Fawlty Towers is the best of it. And it's something I noticed in Frasier, they do that. They've done a few of the times, but that's really the only sitcom I can think which really just dials it up, because I think Americans feel uncomfortable watching their main characters, who are designed to be likable, in excruciating situations.
Yes, and I find it interesting that Frasier is one American sitcom that I've always thought was bigger in the UK than it was in the US. Not to say it wasn't successful there, but it was more successful in the UK.
Yes, it's funny. That's one of my favorite sitcoms, and I found it so weird that I related so deeply to this character who's an American.
I'll never get over the fact there's one actor, sorry, in that show who was born in Manchester,
and that's I can't remember her name now. Daphne.
She's supposed to be born in, but the actress was not from Manchester. One of the actors, however, was genuinely born in Manchester, and it's the father who moved to the US when he was a very young boy.
Who's only 11 years older than Kelsey Grammer.
Oh, really? Yes. I didn't know.
Which I thought was quite remarkable. That's quite a bold casting choice. But anyway, we've ended up talking about Frasier, and we should have been talking about
yes. It's one of the more relatable ones for Brits. But Fawlty Towers, he builds up like a volcano. You're almost waiting until he has that meltdown.
Yes, and it's the saddest thing about British comedy shows is some of them, like Fawlty Towers, are practically perfect, but they only have like a handful of episodes.
Oh yeah, because it's a very small number, right?
Yeah, and the Fawlty Towers, there are some that I guess now the generations don't remember, but I used to stop around the playground with my friends doing the "Don't mention the war," iconic lines, and him driving off and yes. And there was one with the Americans where there's an American saying, "I'll have a Waldorf salad." And he's like, "I'm sorry, sir, we're fresh out of Waldorfs."
My wife has heard that line from me quite a few times, I must say.
But I think that is just one of the greatest sitcoms ever written, and I absolutely adore it.
I always find it interesting, as you mentioned, there's an arc that goes throughout as he gradually makes it worse and worse and worse for himself. You can't cut away to a commercial break.
No,
American sitcoms have to have all these zingy one-liners. You have to be able to go into any scene and it works by itself, because you never know in the United States, in the television networks, traditionally, you never knew when there was going to be a commercial break, except that it would be often and long.
Absolutely. And the other thing about American sitcoms is a lot of them, like Friends, get transported to France and Germany and Spain, and they get translated, and they have to be funny in translation. Whereas I think British comedies, and especially something like Fawlty Towers, is so intrinsically British.
Yeah. And one thing is, with America having so many different diverse groups within it, anything that's broadcast has to appeal to, 300 million people with such a range of different cultural backgrounds. Whereas in the UK, we know it's a joke. Like the small quantity of us, the 60, 70 million of us, we're all on a kind of wavelength in terms of humor.
And some of it, like, making fun of German people or Manuel, that didn't really translate in America, because America is a melting pot. And, here in Pennsylvania, there's Germantown and all the Germans who came and settled here.
Yeah, so we might have some protests against the... I'm thinking of the major talk about Indians and women.
Oh, yes. And that was one of the things. I mean, I don't think Fawlty Towers has aged that badly in terms of things, because people always, they realized that the major was an elderly chap with interesting things. So that's my first one. And then my second one, I think, is quite similar in terms, but I'm a history major and I love history, and it's Blackadder. And Blackadder is just,
as
again,
soon as you said
perfect.
it, I mean, the question pops into my mind. Oh, sorry. Before I go into that, again, for those who have not seen it, who aren't familiar, what is the setup of Blackadder? I'm getting ahead of myself.
So Blackadder, I think, is generally called Edmund Blackadder, and each show, each series of the show, which is normally only 4 episodes long, takes place in a different historical time period. So in season 1, he was Edmund the Black, wasn't he? He was the son of King. You have to season 1 that often.
No, neither of us watch season 1 that often.
But he's the king's son, and it's basically he is a weasel. And he's trying to sort of weasel his way into power, weasel his way out of trouble. And this theme continues. So in the second series, which takes place in Elizabethan England, he is Lord Blackadder, who is part of the Queen Elizabeth's Privy Council. And each episode he gets into some shenanigans, which are very relevant to the stories in English history that are popular. So in the second season, when set in Elizabethan England, you have, of course, the episode when he travels just like Sir Francis Drake, travel around the world. Gets a new page boy who's actually a girl dressed up, and they go through the awkward thing of, gosh, I'm falling in love with my page boy, and then it turns out that she's a woman. And of course, Elizabethan theatre, Shakespeare especially, always had a lot of cross-dressing going on in it. And it's just a broad strokes for those of us who are familiar with English history, which I think is most English people. Like, it's just wonderful because you get it. There are these wonderful jokes that are relevant to English history, and again, he gets himself into these scrapes. But I think what's different between Edmund Blackadder and Basil Fawlty is Edmund Blackadder is a very clever man. He's very witty. He is in his own way quite competent, whereas Basil Fawlty isn't necessarily that way. But also, Blackadder had the third season was set in Georgian England, and then the fourth season, which is perhaps the most iconic one, was set in the trenches of World War One, and it managed to be not just a very funny comedy show when he plays Captain Blackadder, but also quite a scathing commentary on World War One. And I think most people remember the final scenes of the final episode of the fourth season of Blackadder, when he and goes over the top of the trenches with his men, and they all get mown down. That's by machine gun fire. I mean, that's not what you think of when you think of a comedy show, is it?
And it's interesting, there's a poll in the UK about the best moment in British history, and that topped it. And quite a few of us were pointing out, it's not funny. It's heartbreaking.
So the last line is like, it serves me right for trying to get out of this war by pretending to be mad, because who'd notice another madman around here?
Exactly. But it is.
And they've had some. Oh, go on.
Oh, yeah. I was just saying is that for those of us who are interested in history, or those of us who were learning history at the point when we were watching it, it's wonderful. It helps you remember.
Absolutely. And my son, my middle child, is now, for some reason, super into Napoleonic and First World War history. And so I can sit down and watch it with him. And he's like, oh, I understand this joke because I'm interested in history.
And of course, it's Hugh Laurie who is cast as the idiot in Blackadder the Third.
He was king in, he was the king, the prince, wasn't he? Prince George in Blackadder the Third. And then he was George, who was the second lieutenant serving Captain Blackadder. And he's wonderful. Most Americans are familiar with him as House, where he's like this incredibly intelligent man, and then an incredibly intelligent, acidic, acerbic man. Whereas then he plays this lovable buffoon.
His whole career here is completely typecast as a buffoon, and had to escape to America to play someone with, well, a normal-sized brain and beyond.
Yes, absolutely. So that's definitely my second favorite. And if you're an American or anybody who's not familiar with Blackadder, you should watch season 4 of Blackadder, because it is an educational thing. I think it's like, here's a slice of British culture for you.
Oh yeah, I mean, our history teachers talked about this, and I've heard serious historians debate this. Obviously, you have to watch all the way through to get the full effect. Okay, so that's Fawlty Towers, Blackadder. And finally,
Red Dwarf, which I love. Red Dwarf. I remember when it first came on. I was quite young, and I think they
Mm.
recently had the most recent one ever. But there are like 5 seasons where it was really really good. And for those who are not familiar with it, Red Dwarf is a science fiction show set on a mining space craft called Red Dwarf. Due to the actions of a very ambitious officer called Arnold Rimmer, unfortunately, everyone on the ship was wiped out in a radiation accident. Everyone except for this complete layabout called Dave Lister, who had just been punished for smuggling a cat on board by being placed in stasis for, it was meant to be, I think, 3 months or something.
Mm-hmm.
But he was in stasis when all of the crew got wiped out by this radiation thing. It would take millions of years for the radiation to dissipate. So the computer, which is an AI called Holly, decided to keep him in stasis until it was safe for him to come out, at which point it's just continued on its course for 1 million years. So they're 1 million years away from home. And so there is Dave Lister, who's just a deadbeat guy stuck in the middle of nowhere. There's the computer, who is, to use the, I know a lot of people will cringe when you use the word, but it's this American word. He's sort of a functionally retarded computer. Not very intelligent.
Over the million years, yeah, his brain capacity has degenerated.
So you have Dave, and you have this AI, Holly, and you have this creature that's evolved from a cat. And then the AI resurrects Arnold Rimmer in the form of a hologram who can't touch anything, to make sure Dave doesn't go mad, which is funny because Rimmer and Lister just hate each other. And finally, they end up getting a very codependent robot called Crichton to join them. And they're a bunch of idiots in space. And I like it. I really like it because they're a bunch of idiots in space. Even though they seem to hate each other and seem to be antagonistic against each other, there is kind of like a comradeship between them that's quite fun. But I enjoy it because normally you think of space, and in America, a sci-fi show is like Star Trek or something like that. It's all beautiful, shiny corridors, men in beautiful uniforms, doing epic space stuff. Whereas this is like being stuck on a cargo ship in space.
Yeah, it's the mundaneness. They've all got their checklists they have to go through. There's some things that obviously robots should be doing, but it's too expensive to get the robots. They just employ a cheap man to do it.
Yep. One of the cool things about Red Dwarf was the fact that a lot of the stories they ran were actually legitimate science fiction stories. And science fiction is a wonderful way of telling stories and putting hypothetical situations in. So this crew of bumbling idiots who are kind of relatable, like Arnold Rimmer, I guess, as somebody like Basil Fawlty, you can kind of relate to him if you're a bit uptight. And Dave Lister, if you're just a schlub, you can kind of relate to him.
Or alternatively, you know someone who is that person. And you're saying, that's totally you. And they're like, no, that's nothing like me. And I'm like, it's totally you.
Absolutely, yes. And I think Arnold Rimmers, I know a few Arnold Rimmers. But they have these really interesting science fiction concepts, like they go to an alternative dimension where they meet female versions of themselves, and they go to a universe where time is running backwards, and they find a machine which allows them to live in a better than life virtual reality, and Arnold Rimmer just is so self-loathing that even though he can get anything he wants, what he does is creates a world that's his own personal hell and basically torments himself because of his self-loathing.
It is brilliant. And these were broadcast in that gap between the old Doctor Who and the new Doctor Who. The BBC decided it could have one sci-fi show at a time, and this is what kind of filled that gap.
And I think it's amazing because it bridges, in some ways, like Blackadder bridges a gap between being just comedy and also, oh, look, it's kind of a history show. I'd say Red Dwarf is legitimate science fiction that just happens to be really quite funny.
And when the lead actor was asked about Red Dwarf, do you think it's kind of got a kind of cult status? I love his reply. It's too big to be a cult.
But I remember, the nice thing is it's been going for such a long time. I used to watch it with my friend. We used to get the episodes and stuff. And the other thing that I don't think is quite the same in America with comedy shows is Brits they're so quotable. Oh, yeah. Like, I don't know about you, but I probably do quote some British sitcoms quite often, especially the Blackadder.
Well, I was thinking one of the nice things about Red Dwarf is somebody tipped off the writers, because originally it was a very adult comedy. There was lots of adult language, and they were tipped off. The BBC had 2 slots available, and if they cut out the language, they could have one, after 9 o'clock and one before 9 o'clock. It could be in consideration for both. And they're so lazy, they just went with word replacement. Anything rude became the word smeg.
Yes. Isn't that funny? And then smeghead is now, in the British lexicon.
Exactly. So it's brilliant how it's influenced the language. Oh, it's such a piece of smeg.
Absolutely.
I just think smeg fridges, like they're super expensive, and you just
yes.
have the word smeg. Why? Why would I want that?
So yeah, I just think they're wonderful shows because they are genuinely laugh out loud funny. They're more than just a sitcom, and I just think they are so quintessentially British. Even Red Dwarf, you wouldn't think would necessarily be quintessentially British, but it is. It's just like you have these merchant marine vessels traveling around the world that probably have a crew all from Liverpool. You've got this Red Dwarf. It was nothing special. It wasn't the Starship Enterprise or anything like that. It was just a mining ship, and so you just got a bunch of crew from Liverpool.
One of the interesting things I'll say about it, I was listening to a BBC culture show years and years and years ago, and they're talking about how, British culture is obviously traditionally very white, and comedy had been very white for a long time. And they're saying, can you imagine a sitcom in the UK where you had half the cast as white and half the cast as black? And it went on for some time until eventually somebody said, but Red Dwarf.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd never even thought about that.
Exactly. And that's one of its strengths. You'd never think about that until it's pointed out to you.
I can't remember the name of the actor who plays Dave Lister, but he was accused and I think exonerated of rape at one point. But he said, the show was so popular and he was so popular, he kind of forgot that he was black until he went to jail.
He's just Dave Lister.
Dave Lister, yeah. And I think when didn't they have a science fiction channel in the UK for a while called Dave, and everyone knew they were referring to Dave Lister.
There is now a kind of a show channel called Dave, which shows lots of repeats, and I think they had a fair few Robot Wars as well, which of course is hosted by that actor.
Yes, God, I want to know his name because I like him a lot. And he was everywhere.
This is the point where Pete Brook on his podcast will add in, I find a computer indispensable.
Yes. He was portrayed by Craig Charles. That's it.
Oh, okay.
Craig Charles, who
no
was
relation to Charles from the Bond films.
No, but he was brilliant in it. I mean, I think there's just something. There was something magical about all four of them together and the way they played off against each other.
Yeah, and even the outtakes, like, they carry on through, and the rehearsal kind of mistakes which get filmed and so on. It is fun to see the interplay between them. I mean, I'd say there's a solid 8 series that I enjoy.
Yeah,
and it was also very different.
That's a show that continued going. I mean, I think it's got the core solid episodes, but then they reinvented and they, I think at one point the actor who played Arnold Rimmer, he went to America to try and get a career, and so they had to replace him, and they brought in someone else as Lister's ex-girlfriend, and it wasn't terrible.
No, it's interesting how they've had to swap out actors. So, for example, the main actor who played Holly at one point had to step back for health reasons, was replaced by an actress, which was just an updated program within the show.
Yeah.
But at some point, I think they find a watch in a bin somewhere, and it is the old Holly, because once he was through his treatment, they brought him back. Yo, what's up, dudes?
And the wonderful thing is they never really explain anything. They never try and justify it. They're never like, oh, well, we got to, it's just like, okay, he's Holly's a woman now.
Yes. Yeah.
And Lister's girlfriend Kachansky, we met her several times in season 1, and she was this rough Scottish girl, and then suddenly she's this incredibly posh girl, and it's like they don't offer any explanation.
And then there's another incarnation of her when she comes back again. She's some kind of Time Lord.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like the Bond movies. There is a very loose continuity.
Exactly. And one of Dave Lister's best friends is, of course, Ron Weasley's dad in Harry Potter.
Yes, I remember that.
What exactly is the function of a rubber duck?
And it's funny, actually. It's almost in the Harry Potter movies. It's almost who's who of British sitcoms. I guess Fawlty Towers. I mean, Fawlty Towers. There have been a few people from Fawlty Towers who ended up in Harry Potter, including John Cleese, I believe. Didn't he play Ghost?
Paid a fortune to be in it for about 6 seconds. Yeah. And it's funny because when I saw him, I thought it was Billy Connolly because of the hair.
So those are my 3 favorite sitcoms. I would have to admit, I know we're not going to talk about them because over limited time, but I'd love to know just off the top of the head, what are yours? Yes, Minister.
Oh, certainly, Yes, Minister. I have in the video call, I have the books behind me, and I've been watching the DVDs again. I'm a huge fan of Yes, Minister. I might have to say Dad's Army just because it's so long running, right? It's still broadcast now, and Last of the Summer Wine, one of the longest running sitcoms in the world.
That's a very Yorkshire sitcom. I have to admit,
Yes.
I never quite got into that growing up in the South, but that's just iconic.
Oh,
Peter
absolutely.
Sellers.
So my first school was in Yorkshire. When I moved away, it was just lovely to watch it and see, oh yes, this is my world that I remember. I've been to that village. I do find it sometimes, they're kind of walking down the street, they turn a corner. I know they're on a completely different street, and sometimes
Yeah.
it's a different town, but it's still lovely to see.
And again, that was a very quintessentially British show. I mean, the relationship between these men and their wives, and it's like that's what people of a certain age in Yorkshire would be like.
Oh, absolutely. And it started,
you
what,
would
in
know
the
you would know them.
70s. It started, oh yes, absolutely. It's very relatable in that sense. But it started around in the 70s and it carried on into the 2000s. So it is one of the longest running sitcoms in the world in terms of time duration, but only one writer.
That's amazing. And think of the concept of it's a bunch of old men in Yorkshire, and then it runs for 30 years.
Absolutely.
So they start off as old men, and they're just
getting older and older and older, which is good. I recently saw the first episode and I was actually quite shocked that they took the time to explain the basic concept. Because I've grown up with the show. The concept is what it is.
And
so
what is the concept?
So the idea is they've all been laid off early because all the factories around here were closing at that time, and they don't want to retrain. They don't want at 50 to start a new job, and so some of them just say, well, let's just fill our days and see what we can do. Get a bathtub, attach wheels to it, go downhill, see what happens.
Because at the end of the day, we men don't really grow up.
Exactly, and there's the other half of the show where it's the lady sitting round to tea or putting the world to rights against their men.
Absolutely, which is, I mean, that's there's a character who reminds me of Last of the Summer Wine, Andy Capp. They have comics of him, don't they? Do they still have comics of him?
I have seen Andy Capp. I'm not sure if it's still going.
No, but in America they sell these potato chips with Andy Capp on them.
Oh.
Which is so bizarre to me. They're called Andy Capp's Hot Fries or something. My Mr. Child had one the other day, and I'm like, and the Andy Capp comics never ran in America. No one has any idea about him or anything like that. But he happens to have these chips here, and then he's a kind of a layabout, isn't he? Who just in the same way that the Last of the Summer Wine crew were just they just men who weren't doing anything and getting up to mischief.
And you always have three main characters. Peter Sallis was the one who went through all the series. For a long time, he had Compo, who was the wastrel. He was always scruffy, no matter what he did. And when the actor passed away, actually his son comes in as the young man in the group. And then you always have the third man who changes about. Sometimes it's a former policeman, sometimes it's a former corporal. But he's the one who's like getting them to do stuff this week.
Yes. And that's again the biplane. They, in some ways, I guess that's something that's similar to Red Dwarf. It's there's Arnold Rimmer who's wanting people, wanting to create order and be in charge and the boss, and there's Lister who's like a layabout, and it's And
whereas with Basil Fawlty, it's just this hotel would be so much better without the guests.
Yes, absolutely. That's the thing, and in some ways you can kind of I can relate to Basil Fawlty.
I mean, I used to teach at a university, and it was so much better when the regular undergraduates weren't there. The summer was brilliant. You just had the masters and the PhD. It was much better without any students. So yes, I can see myself there.
Absolutely.
Okay, Roland, thank you very much for discussing your top 3 British comedies. Is there any others that you'd like to add as an also ran, or was there anything that almost made the list?
My parents were always really, really fond of As Time Goes By.
Oh yeah,
which has a Bond connection because it was about these. There was Judi Dench played. I can't remember. I know that husband was called Lionel. She played a woman who fell in love with this man in Africa, and then they separated and went their different ways, and then they met again 30 years later and had a second marriage. And my parents adored that because my parents met and got married in Africa, and they were like, I would say, the colonial set trying to adapt to life back in England, and my parents could relate to that a lot, and I thought that was quite nice.
And the Bond connection is that when you watch Tomorrow Never Dies in the war room, it's basically the cast of As Time Goes By, or squabbling, but in uniform.
Yes, absolutely. And then there was another one, Only Fools and Horses, which I was never a massive fan of, but I respect immensely. It is a very funny show, and I kind of the characters in it. They're always character driven.
Yeah.
And there was Del Boy, who was this little white boy who was always trying to come up with some entrepreneurial scheme, and his dumb brother, and they drove around in this iconic little three-wheeler Reliant Robin.
He's a dumb brother, but he has some O levels.
Yes. And now he's playing a Harvard professor in the new Frasier.
Well, I heard the story behind that is he was walking down the street, the actor was walking down the street with Stephen Fry. And someone goes up and he's like, "Hey, you silly Wally, how are you?" and all that stuff. And then, "Oh, nice to meet you, Mr. Fry." And he's like, why are they treating me like this? And how come they're calling you Mr. Fry and all that? And Stephen Fry says, "Well, I play archbishops and I play professors and I play important people. You play younger brothers. So they treat you like a younger brother." And he's like, "Right, from now on, I'm going to be Napoleon. I'm going to be a judge. I'm going to be a professor."
And he's wonderful in the new Frasier. He has all of the best lines.
See the new Niles?
Kind of. They're quite clever the way they've like divided that up. But I remember within the first 30 seconds, one of his lines is like, "Oh, you Americans and your vile attachment to your children," which
British people famously are not attached to their children.
Yes. And there's another one where he says, "Oh, this is why I never had children." And Frasier says, "You have 4."
Oh, yes. I didn't like to think of them that way.
Yeah. Right. Well, this is always such a treat.
Thank you so much for coming on, especially at short notice.
No, and are you asking other people about their favorite sitcoms as well?
There may be another guest coming in the future.
I'm looking forward to that. That would be really interesting to see, because I think there's something about the different shows, that tell a little bit about yourself, which ones you resonate towards.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for joining me. It's been a pleasure, as always.